You know, when I said I was coming to Cleveland, I would have really appreciated a heads up from one of you that it's both hot and cold and windy and humid at sunset at the same time. Somebody make Ohio make sense. Now, you may be wondering, Brett, what are you doing in Cleveland in the middle of October when the weather makes no sense? What is your purpose here? And beyond the fact that low-key, Cleveland, pretty great for street photography. Didn't know that before I got here, but the more you know. I'm also here for a football game, and a damn good one at that. I actually spent most of today in my hotel room just studying my ass off on this Cliff Kingsbury offense. And I even spent the 3 days before I came out here looking at Cliff's offense because I wanted to understand everything that I could about it. What they're good at, what they're not so good at, what they tend to favor in key situations, maybe some schematic things that consistently work against them. And what I found is that because of some, in my opinion, schematic similarities between what the Browns like to do on defense and what the 49ers did to Arizona last week on defense, I actually think the Browns have a pretty decent shot of slowing down the Cardinals here. Now, by the time this video comes out, obviously this game will already be long over. It will be dead and gone and buried, so I'm not trying to predict what's going to happen. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go back to the hotel. I'm going to show you all of the film from all of these games leading up to this matchup. We're going to tailgate, we're going to watch it live, and then we're going to show all of the film from this game as well to see what actually happened and how everything from this season all ties together. Sound like a plan? You're not here. You don't get a vote. There's literally nobody here. I am alone. Apparently nobody lives in Cleveland. Beautiful city, but there's nobody fucking here. I don't get it. I have a weird job. Let's go watch film. Let's just pretend for a second that all of us are on the Browns defensive coaching staff, and we've been tasked with putting together a game plan to slow down this Arizona offense. The first step in that process is going to be studying the Cardinals offense, which I've already done, to establish at least what their comfort zone is, what their strengths are, what their favored personnel mismatches are, maybe some key situational calls that they've had here and there, just to kind of paint a picture of what they're good at, what they're not good at, and what they're going to rely on schematically when their back is against the wall. And based on the first 5 weeks of this season, which again, I've already charted, their two comfort zones or areas of strength, whatever you want to call them, the two areas that Arizona excels in the most are manufacturing or scheming up space with route distribution and kind of dictating and forcing defenses into really bad matchups in that space that they create. And I know that sounds super generic, and I could say that about a lot of offenses, but Arizona kind of does it in some very special ways. So let's dive into this film, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. First things first, let's talk about space, leverage, and how the Cardinals use both of these things to their advantage in the screen game and the run game. Across the entire NFL this season, Kyler Murray has thrown the fourth most screen passes or flare routes off of motion per Sports Info Solutions, and the Cardinals throw so many of those short, quick passes out to the edges because they consider it like an extension of their run game. Instead of calling like crack toss or something in that vein to get their running backs out in space or on the edge, they just call screens to get the ball in their playmakers' hands with blockers out in front, and they consider that to be pretty much the same thing. Now, what's interesting is that when defenses are in single high safety defensive structures like cover 1 or cover 3, that is when the Cardinals are far more likely to lean on that screen game because the leverage and the spacing of that defensive structure makes it a lot easier for those screens, or let's just call them what they are, extended outside runs, to be successful. Let's use this screen against the 49ers that you're seeing right now as an example. San Francisco is in a single high safety structure, the Cardinals are in the gun in a 3-by-1 formation, trips to the field, but the running back, Chase Edmonds, is also flanking Kyler Murray to the field side, essentially making this a 4-by-1 look because he is a very real threat to be what's called a fast 4 to the flat. Fast 4, of course, means that he can become the fourth receiving threat to that side, and he won't be chipping or helping in protection at all. He just goes, and he goes fast to get out to the edge. If the Niners were in a 2 high safety structure and not a single high safety structure, you would have the field side safety at probably about a 12-yard depth, mid-pointing between the number 2 and the number 3 receivers to the field. And this nickel corner, which coaches refer to as the apex defender, he would be much tighter on the receiver and leveraging himself slightly outside of that receiver so that he could easily push out to the flat and pick up that running back if he did indeed turn into a threat as a fast 4. However, since this is a single high structure, that safety is much deeper and leveraged way further inside than he would be in a 2 high look because he has to defend this post area in the deep middle of the field first and foremost. And that lack of an extra body that can come down quickly from good leverage to help with these issues out on the edge where either you get out leveraged yourself or you get outnumbered in space, what have you, that kind of issue is what makes this Cardinals screen game so hard to defend from this defensive structure. Arizona's play design here is actually pretty cool. They fake like it's some kind of pin and pull draw for Murray to freeze the defensive line and the linebackers, and then he just pulls up and throws that flare screen out to Edmonds. And right when the ball is in the air, you can really see how pronounced those leverage issues are from this single high structure. Yes, playing single high defenses of course helps stop the interior run game just by virtue of stacking the box, but when it comes to the edge run game or the screen game, because let's be honest, that's what this is, your safety help has to come from all the way downtown to help fill this alley, and there's just nobody that can get there fast enough from good leverage from the deep post, and it turns into an easy 9-yard gain on second down. In essence, they're trying to avoid going through the teeth of the defense by just going around it, and it usually works out pretty well. And they do this kind of stuff every week, by the way. It's very on brand for them, and the Niners were not the only ones to fall victim to it. For instance, there was this tunnel screen from back in week 1 against the Titans, which still, all the way in week 8, is one of my personal favorite screen designs that any team has run all year long. Normally, running a tunnel screen to the wide side of the field is much harder to do because oftentimes your intended receiver is split so far away from the offensive line that it's really tough to get an offensive lineman out there to pick off the apex defender and seal off the outside of that tunnel. But the way that Cliff Kingsbury runs it here against this single high safety structure makes it so much easier to execute, and this design gives the Cardinals yet another solid option whenever they want to run a screen to the field side without condensing their splits. To pull this screen off, Cliff puts tight end Max Williams in motion, specifically using what's called escort motion. If you're familiar with the Ravens offense at all under Greg Roman, you'll probably recognize it because they use this constantly. And that escort motion right at the snap is Kingsbury's way to get a faster body out there to block the apex defender and to seal off the outside of that tunnel much quicker than any offensive lineman would ever be able to do. Combine that with the run action going the other way and the left guard giving a pull key to the Mike linebacker going the opposite direction, plus Bud Dupree going unblocked off the edge to try to suck him deeper into the backfield, and now you've got half the defense getting dragged in one direction, and the other half of the defense about to be outnumbered in space by big body blockers with the extremely explosive Rondale Moore getting a bunch of room to work with. I know that just saying the Cardinals offense is all about leverage and space might sound like I'm oversimplifying things, but it's really not when you look at plays like this one. This is what the air raid philosophy is all about, both in the run game and in the passing game. It's just about finding ways to get skill position players the ball in space with the easiest matchups and the least amount of resistance possible. It really is that simple. The screen game isn't the only way that they scheme up spacing and matchup advantages though. They also do throw the ball down the field quite a bit. But when they do just do that normal drop back pass game and bomb the ball down the field, they do it in the most air raid way possible by running simple concepts over and over and over again that all have endless adjustments on top so that no matter how many times you run those simple plays, they all look very different from one another based on the type of defense they're going against. In the words of Mike Leach, one of Cliff Kingsbury's biggest mentors, the air raid doesn't attack defenses in particular per se, but it attacks grass. And again, that goes for the run game, the screen game, and the drop back passing game. It's all about adjusting routes to the coverage to find those little patches of grass that are open so that the quarterback can throw his receivers open into those spaces and get easy completions. For instance, let's once again go back to that Titans game because one of Kingsbury's favorite third and medium calls, in particular this is a 3rd and 6 opportunity, is a variation of an old air raid staple known as YCross. Though this isn't really the YCross that we all know and love because there's no tight end on the field and it's run from 10 personnel in an empty formation, but regardless, the route distribution and the adjustments are so similar that you might as well consider it a modern version of that decades-old air raid concept anyway. The progression goes like this. AJ Green, the X-receiver on the boundary side of the formation, is the quote-unquote alert rail down the sideline off a speed release outside, and that rail route can convert to a straight-up go route if the corner comes up to challenge him and if he leaves no cushion over the top. After all, against most defenses, this boundary side corner will have no safety help anyway, so as the old saying goes, if he's even, he's leaving. Now, the second progression, if Kyler doesn't like Green on the rail route or the alert go, is Christian Kirk on this deep cross, which in itself can convert to a number of different routes as well. If there's a single high safety, for instance, Kirk will just keep running and cross that safety's face like a normal crossing route because there's no way that safety will be able to affect the throw and he can just go in with his speed. However, if it's 2 high safeties and that boundary safety has leverage on him to potentially trigger on that cross, he can either sit the route down right in between the hashes, or he can keep running it to clear another window and then sit it down between the hashes and the numbers, all while working his way back upfield to Murray. Some offenses also have what's called a takeoff adjustment against teams that play a lot of quarters, but that's getting a little too deep in the weeds and we'll just save that for another day. Now, if Murray doesn't like Green on the alert or Kirk on the cross, his third progression is Chase Edmonds on this whip return to the boundary side flat, which of course can also convert to just being a burst in route if Edmonds feels like he can cross the defender's face and win inside over the middle of the field. In that instance, Kyler will just wait for Edmonds to declare his route before he throws him open, but again, it's just all about whatever Edmonds wants to run. However, if even that route is somehow not open, which it usually is, he also has DeAndre Hopkins on the backside dig as read number 4, and finally Rondale Moore as the option route to the field side as read number 5. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways for this play to succeed, and it's been one of the pillars of the air raid offense for multiple generations of air raid coaches for a reason. On this specific example, of course, Kyler threw an absolutely gorgeous ball to Kirk on the deep cross versus a single high look, so he didn't really need to progress past that read. But if we fast forward 3 more weeks to the Rams game, also on another 3rd and 6, and also from the same exact area of the field around the opponent 40-yard line, we can see another instance of Kingsbury dialing up this same exact concept in order to generate a big play on a more favorable matchup to AJ Green this time. Again, it's the same exact progression here, rail route to alert go from Green, then the deep cross from Kirk, then the option route from Edmonds, the backside dig from Hopkins, and then finally the other option route from Rondale. However, here is why this play looks so different than the last time I showed it to you. This boundary side safety is bracketing Edmonds on the option route to help out Leonard Floyd, and the boundary side corner is matching Green very aggressively from outside leverage. This is called playing a tight third in match zone coverage, by the way, and because he's in that tight third technique, his hips are pointed upfield towards the line of scrimmage rather than opening early to stay over the top at all costs. So naturally, Green is just going to adjust this rail route and slip inside the corner to convert it to a go route as the alert. On the end zone angle, you can even see Kyler Murray's eyes darting from reading Green's release and then going back to the post safety to check his position and if he's a threat to the throw. And then he goes back to Green again so that he can let this ball fly and accurately place it inside with Green's leverage for the touchdown. Believe it or not, this is the exact same call in the same down and distance from the same area of the field, just with a wildly different read and result because of how flexible the routes in this offense really are. If you want an even crazier example for just how adaptable this passing game really is though, look no further than the Minnesota game from back in week 3. This is a 1st and 10 call from, again, around midfield early on in the 3rd quarter, And I'm not entirely sure what Cliff specifically calls this concept, but it kinda looks like a similar call known as Haas Y Divide in the Patriots playbook, so for simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna start there. The route spacing and progression for this concept is both very simple, but also very complex at the same time, which is what I love about it. And the pre-snap read is going to be based on if it's a single high look or a two high look. If it's a single high safety look, the read will almost always be this fade smash combination to the field on the trip side of the formation. The Patriots, by the way, call this Haas, meaning a hitch and a seam. But the origins of this concept go back multiple decades, probably most prominently with Purdue in the late 90s and early 2000s. They used it a ton, especially with Drew Brees. He was really good at throwing it, but anyway, I digress. Now, typically when most teams do run this, again, if it's only a single high safety look that has no shot to affect the play, it's almost an automatic read to try to hit this slot fade to Rondale Moore because he's fast as shit, and he can probably get a step on most nickel corners that would be trying to cover him on that route. Another viable progression, however, especially against two high looks, is going to be this read route from number 3 to the field. The initial call for this number 3 receiver is going to be a divide route where he will pressure that linebacker and then burst right up the middle to find grass in between the safeties. But again, this is a read route after all, so he does have the flexibility to convert it to something else if he needs to. For instance, if Eric Kendricks here did not turn and match the route, he would just keep going on the divide and attack that space. But since Kendricks actually did turn and match it to take away that space, now he can sit it down and work outside away from Kendricks while also coming back towards the line of scrimmage to present an easier target. So either way, barring Eric Kendricks being able to keep up with a wide receiver in space that is working away from his leverage, this route is usually going to be pretty open against two high safety looks. The last progression here, which is typically what Kyler is going to be looking to if he's getting a pre-snap read for cover 5, meaning 2 deep zones with man coverage across the board underneath. The reads he's looking for are the deep out from Hopkins one-on-one or the option route from the running back out of the backfield. And honestly, this is more of a matchup question than anything else, and Kyler will usually just work whichever one of these guys has the easier matchup. In this instance, he smelled cover 5 here from Minnesota's nickel personnel, and he really liked Chase Edmonds' matchup against Nick Vigil in space, so he just took that easy pitch and catch for a fairly effortless first down. Flash forward once again to that Rams game though, and we actually see this same concept run once again down in the red zone, but because the Rams were running a totally different defense, as you might have guessed, every single route in this concept was actually converted into something else. The fade smash to the field turned into AJ Green running an in route to work away from the outside leverage of the flat zone corner, and Christian Kirk converted the slot fade into a corner route in order to flatten himself down and away from the safety playing in a deep half zone. On the other side of the field, because DeAndre Hopkins is facing a press corner alignment this time instead of an off corner, he turns his own corner route into a fade off a burst release, and the Y position here, Max Williams, is not going to sit his divide route down this time because the linebacker is not turning to match it. You can actually see Williams peeking at that linebacker to read whether or not he needs to be working to that grass in the deep middle or if he needs to be hooking and working back outside. And once he gets confirmation that that backer is not carrying that route, he immediately turns and looks for the ball, which of course is already coming towards him in the air. One beautifully placed pass later, and the Cardinals had another 6 on the board. I know that just on first glance, this looks like a completely different concept than the one that Arizona ran against the Vikings 1 week earlier, but believe me, it is the same play call. The entire point of the air raid offense is to basically have multiple plays all packaged into one so that the offense can operate as quickly and as efficiently as possible with limited verbiage and maximum flexibility. The amount of different plays that the Cardinals call from week to week is honestly not that big relative to the rest of the league, but they're so adaptable in how they run those plays against every kind of coverage they face that it still looks like a massive, complicated system. It is streamlined, it is fast, but above all, it is multiple, and that is why the air raid works. Alright, so that's what the Cardinals offense looks like in a nutshell. All of those concepts I talked about are kind of the core of their philosophy, so keep them in mind.
And by the way, if you hadn't noticed, it's game day. I time traveled a little bit. Cliff Kingsbury's out with COVID, their quarterback's coach is out with COVID, so I have no idea how this is going to impact play calling. For all I know, the offense is going to look entirely different than what it did weeks 1 through 5 that we just broke down. So what we're going to do, head over to the stadium, tailgate a little bit, watch this game live, and then after this game, win or lose, we're going to dissect all of the tape from this matchup and see if the offense really is noticeably different with or without Kingsbury. And of course, we're going to see what the Browns did to try to stop them. So with that, let's get to it.
Drive, and it's DeAndre Hopkins getting his first catch. Oh, what a move! DeAndre Hopkins all the way in for the touchdown! A spectacular open field move for his 5th touchdown of the year.
Well, would you look at that? We're already back in California through the magic of time travel and post-production editing software. It's been a few days since the Browns got absolutely destroyed by the Cardinals over in Cleveland, and then of course the Cardinals also destroyed the Texans too, which I guess kind of comes as no surprise if we're being honest here. The Texans are the Texans, but I guess you could say that the Cardinals are on a wee bit of a roll here. Now, you may be wondering, Brett, you were in Cleveland like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now. Why did you wait this long to put this episode out? And beyond the fact that production on something this long obviously takes a really long time, especially in the editing department and the film study and the script writing and all that kind of stuff, I wanted to wait until this week specifically because the Cardinals are going to be playing in primetime. If you're not aware, they have a huge Thursday night showdown against whatever is left of the Packers, whoever's not on the COVID protocol at this point. But it's a huge game, and all of you are actually going to get to watch this offense operate. So I wanted to wait until this week because you could actually watch this video and then see this offense live and maybe be able to pick up on a few things as you're watching that game. And specifically, if you're a Packers fan and you're watching the other side of the ball, I want to be able to show you some things that the Browns did that were both really good and really bad, so that when you're watching this Packer defense this week, you can kind of keep your eyes out for some things that actually do slow down this Cardinals offense a little bit. I'm not saying that it completely shuts them down, but it might be possible to at least slow them down. But before we dive into all of that film to see some things that maybe the Packers defensive coaching staff can learn from that Cleveland game, I do want to take a moment to thank my friends over at Shaker and Spoon for possibly the most on-brand sponsorship opportunity I've ever had on this channel. I get a lot of DMs from people asking how I make my drinks for every single episode and just kind of where to start for somebody that wants to make craft cocktails at home. Because let's be honest, it's kind of an intimidating thing to get into if you don't know anything about it. But with Shaker and Spoon, you can actually learn a lot about how to make good drinks for yourself in probably the most fun possible way. Shaker and Spoon is a subscription service for people that love craft cocktails that will send you a new box every single month with 3 amazing cocktail recipes created by world-class bartenders. Each box is themed around one type of liquor of your preference, so you get to taste a whole bunch of different drinks with different flavor profiles for a base spirit that you actually like and already own. And I happen to love rye cocktails and mezcal cocktails, especially in the fall, so I got the fall boxes for both rye and mezcal, and they have both been incredible. If you already love craft cocktails, or it's just something that you want to get into at home because it's fun to learn, or maybe just looking for a good date night activity with your partner, whatever your reason, Shaker and Spoon is an awesome service, and I know you're going to love it too. So if you're interested, head down to that link in the description below. That is shakerandspoon.com/filmroom, or use promo code filmroom, all one word, and that will get you $20 off your first box of craft cocktails delivered right to your door. Thank you to everybody, and with that being said, let's dive back into this film against the Browns defense, and we'll kind of examine, how those 37 points from the Cardinals happened. What did the Browns do that was really good? What did they do that was really bad? And maybe, just maybe, we can see if there's some lessons that the Packers defense can learn ahead of Thursday night's game that could possibly, potentially, again, I'm not guaranteeing it, I'm just saying potentially, maybe help them slow down this Cardinals offense a little bit. Now, when you look at just the box score, it seems like the Cardinals got basically anything they wanted. They rushed for 144 yards, they had 352 total, and put up 37 points on the board, so on the surface, it looks great for Arizona. But in terms of pure efficiency, this was one of the only games this season where a defense actually made the Cardinals inefficient on a per-play basis. For instance, yes, Arizona did rush for 144 yards, but 40 of those came on a zone read where Kyler checked the play at the line of scrimmage, and they caught the Browns in kind of a funky front on 3rd and long, where Cleveland was forced into having Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who, by the way, is like 225 pounds soaking wet, taking on a double team at the point of attack. So yeah, they gave up a 40-yard carry just on that alone, but on every other run for that entire game, Arizona averaged less than 3 yards per carry. Believe it or not, Cleveland actually did a pretty good job overall in run defense. In addition to that, at least one of Kyler Murray's 4 passing touchdowns were on coverage busts down in the red zone. To me, at least, it looked like they were using what's known as a poach check in match quarters coverage, which, in the absence of a very long explanation for how poach works, the main thing you need to know about it is that the weak side corner, Denzel Ward, is supposed to be shadowing his receiver in man-to-man coverage, and the weak side safety is responsible for either bracketing that receiver with Ward, or if the number 3 receiver from the strong side comes across the field on a crossing route that is beyond the depth of the linebackers, it's his responsibility to poach that route from over the top with his advantageous leverage and cover it from depth. Obviously, on this play, that weak side safety ID'd the crossing route and came off of DeAndre Hopkins to poach it, but Denzel Ward also thought he was responsible for falling off of Hopkins and picking up that crosser, so in the end you had 3 guys picking up the crosser and nobody on Hopkins, who of course got the easy score. Those are the kinds of coverage busts that are just so frustrating for defensive coaches, and to be honest, you could also argue that the first touchdown for Murray that day was also a bust as well, because the Browns completely messed up on what's called a stump check from match quarters against a 3-by-1 look down in the red zone, which should not happen because the entire point of running stump in the red zone is so that you don't get beat by a smash concept, and they still got beat by a smash concept anyway. But that's kind of besides the point, and it's a little bit of a gray area between coverage bust and just not good execution, so I won't really delve into it too much. But regardless, either way, at a minimum, they got 7 points off of straight up busted coverages in quarters, and possibly 14 points depending on your interpretation, and Baker Mayfield turned the ball over 3 times, including twice inside the Browns' own 30-yard line, to give the Cardinals easy scoring drives in the first place. Overall, this was an extraordinarily ugly game, and Arizona certainly did deserve to score 37. I'm not trying to minimize their win at all. They are definitely an offensive juggernaut. But the Browns did expose a few cracks in the armor here in the process that, at least in my opinion, future Cardinals opponents might be able to take advantage of. For instance, remember how I mentioned earlier that Kyler Murray has thrown the 4th most screens and swing passes in the league, and they're almost averaging 7 yards per attempt on those quick hitters this season? Well, against the Browns, who stayed largely in those 2 high safety coverage shells against Arizona that week, Murray tried to throw 6 more screens, swings, and flare routes in total to work those edges of the defense, and he only got 17 yards total on those 6 attempts. That's less than 3 yards per attempt, cutting down Arizona's effectiveness on those types of throws by about 60%. 2 high safety structures almost completely eliminated the effectiveness of this very potent quick passing game, which probably would have caused Arizona a lot more problems moving the ball if the Browns offense at least avoided giving them free red zone possessions in the first place. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, so if the Browns are playing two high safety structures, both to take away that screen game and to take away a lot of the crossing routes that the Cardinals get so many yards on every single week, what about the run game? Surely Arizona would just pound the rock between the tackles and punish those two high safety looks anyway, right? Well, not exactly, because there are ways to play against this Cardinals spread-based rushing attack from two high safeties, and those ways are very effective for Cleveland overall. Remember, other than that one zone read that Chase Edmonds popped for 40 yards in a 3rd and long situation, the Browns held a very good Cardinals rushing attack to less than 3 yards per carry. So how exactly did they do that without getting dinked and dunked to death by RPOs and other kinds of inside runs? To put it as simply as I can, they found success by doing what some coaches, particularly at the college and high school level, refer to as slinging the run fits. This is a technique that's really risen in popularity along with the rise of air raid and spread offenses over the last 10 to 15 years. And what slinging the fits means is that when you're in quarters coverage, like the Browns are here against a 2x2 look from shotgun with the back flanking Kyler Murray to the field side, the nickel corner that is to the side of the running back is not in the run fit at all. His one job as the overhang defender here is to sit inside the number 2 receiver and cover up the slant window and match any routes from that number 2 short and inside. And if it happens to be like a zone read or something like that, then he can trigger and get downhill on Kyler Murray out in space. He has to sit in that slant window and stay completely out of the run fit until Murray no longer has the ball, because if he doesn't do that, the Cardinals can just run glance RPOs all day long against John Johnson, who's lined up way too deep to have any sort of chance of stopping that. Now, on the other side, the apex defender away from the running back side, which in this instance is Owusu-Koramoah, he is in the run fit, and he's responsible for his B-gap bubble between the left tackle and the left guard no matter what. He can wall off inside the number 2 receiver, of course, but the second he reads run, he needs to come downhill and sling himself into that run fit because the Mike linebacker is entirely focused on this backside A-gap, and he has zero shot to get to that front side B-gap himself. That, in essence, is what slinging the run fits is. It's the presentation of a light box up the middle with a 2 high safety structure, but in reality, as the play unfolds, it's really 7 against 6 in the box, and the defense always has outside leverage to keep things from getting outside to the edges anyway. When this play is in full motion, you can even see JOK initially get outside to wall number 2 to the boundary side, but as soon as he reads run, he gets downhill to pressure that B-gap bubble and force James Conner to cut back into the pile where he only gets about 2.5 yards on the carry. How about this other example from even earlier in the game? Again, it's a 2x2 look with the back flanking to the boundary against a match quarters look from Cleveland, but this time responsibilities in the run fit are flipped because of how the back is lined up. Now Owusu-Koramoah is not in the run fit because he's to the side of the running back and he needs to match this tight end to guard against RPOs, but the nickel corner, Troy Hill, is in the run fit because he's lined up away from the running back. You can see just how far inside he's lined up here against this slot receiver because he knows he needs to play the run first and foremost. The Cardinals are running CT counter here right at Hill because they know he's in the fit and they want to try to get James Conner moving downhill against him on the second level because that's kind of a size mismatch. But again, look at how efficiently the Browns are able to exchange on these gaps and win that leverage battle just to keep Conner from being able to get downhill in the first place. Myles Garrett, sensing these pulling blockers coming right at him, immediately slams on the brakes and then shoots inside the lead puller to screw up their angles and of course force Conner to stop and bounce back outside. And Hill takes a great angle himself to stay even further outside and with perfect depth against Conner so that he basically has nowhere to go. He can't just keep bouncing out because Hill can easily win that speed battle and take him down for a big loss out on the edge, but he can't go inside either because Walker and Clowney are pursuing hard as well. So in the end, all he can really do is just put his pads down and take the run for no gain. Again, if you go back to the pre-snap look here and you see the Browns defense in a 2-high shell versus 7 blockers in the core, you would think that the Cardinals have them dead to rights. But with the front side apex player always being in the fit from these quarters looks, it's suddenly not very easy for Arizona to run the ball from these spread formations. Throw in the fact that Cleveland kept forcing that issue by showing two high looks pre-snap and then bringing fire zone calls with the nickel corner just to get Troy Hill as a free runner in the backfield, because let's be honest, he was already in the run fit anyway, so why not just blitz him? And it caused even more problems for Arizona. The Browns got a tackle for loss, a sack, and another OPI call drawn against the Cardinals on an errant ball thrown to Hopkins just on that fire zone call alone. It was really, really effective for them. So yeah, overall, 37 points or not, the Browns did put out some good tape for the rest of the league to watch on how to limit this run game and how to completely shut down their screen game. Arizona only had 5.1 yards per play in that game against Cleveland, which if you stretch that out for an entire season, would be tied for 27th in the league with Detroit. If you're anywhere near the Lions in any statistic ever, that's usually not very good. So clearly there are some lessons that people can learn from that game. To me, the only question is, will Green Bay, or any other future Cardinals opponent for that matter, learn those lessons well enough to slow them down? It's a long season, obviously, and we have a lot of games left to play, and Arizona has a lot of tests remaining on their schedule. So I do think that somebody eventually could probably march into Arizona and completely shit-can this offense. That is a distinct possibility, but I also concede that it would take one hell of a defense to be able to do that. In short, I don't know. I guess we'll see. So I hope this whole breakdown / adventure to Cleveland, however long it ends up being, I'm assuming it's pretty long. So if you're still here at this point, God bless you, you're a warrior. But anyway, I hope that it helped at least some of you understand what makes this Cardinals offense tick. They're very explosive, they're very flexible, but they're also not infallible. I mean, clearly there's some stuff that does actually work against them. Yes, you do need an extremely fast and extraordinarily disciplined defense to make that stuff work because, I mean, let's be honest, the margin for error against Arizona is razor thin. But also, I mean, I guess playing against Kyler Murray in general, you're already on a razor thin margin for error because he's incredible in almost every single possible way. So I guess that's not really that insane of a statement to make. So long story short, the Cardinals are clearly not unbeatable, but at the same time, the list of teams that I think actually can beat them is not very long at all. Like, they're really, really, really fucking good. And I'll just leave it at that. So thank you again for watching. Thank you to Shaker and Spoon again for sponsoring. And of course, one more thank you to the patrons that help to make long form shows like this one possible because they're very, very expensive and time consuming to make. And I literally would not be able to make them without you guys. So hopefully I get to do more of them in the future because I had a lot of fun making it, and I hope you guys had a lot of fun watching it as well. So I'll be back very soon. I have more content sort of like this coming. I have traditional film rooms coming, all that kind of stuff. Remember, I have merch in the store if you're looking for holiday gifts for your local Cardinals fan. Yeah, I think that's enough plugs for one episode. Thank you guys again. Love you all, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.